Hello and welcome to Syndicate Gaming. My name is Jim, and today we're going to be building a Guardians of the Galaxy roster. So, this is something people have been asking for 11 months. I think I saw a comment because I went back and listened to the Guardians of the Galaxy tier list that we have on the channel, and people on there were like, give us a list build. And I've never really gotten around to it. I haven't done a list build in a while since the Criminal Syndicate one. That one has received really good feedback and people asking for more. So this is the perfect time to be doing one. Uh, so just a quick history of the Guardians of the Galaxy. They started out as maybe one of the worst affiliations in the game. Like they were one of the first launches, right? It was like the core set, Hulk, MODOK, and then like Asgard, Wakanda, Guardians, and Black Order was kind of the order there, right? It's like back then the Guardians' leadership was pretty bad, and the characters were a little suspicious. And I think since then they've received a huge glow up for a lot of reasons that I'm going to talk about here. But I just think, it's kind of fun to look back sometimes at the history of Marvel Crisis Protocol to see how far we've come, right? So, uh, before we get too far into it, I want to just bring up that this video is basically sponsored by somebody named Alec in his local game store. Alec bought me a couple coffees on Buy Me a Coffee and said, "Hey Jim, I love the videos, and me and my buddies would like to see a Guardians of the Galaxy list building video." So I want to say a huge thank you to Alec in his local game store for the support. And I just want to tell anyone that if they want to see anything specific, you can go on Buy Me a Coffee and leave me a message on there, and I will do my absolute best to get the video out. But this one's really special to me because this is the first time this has happened, so I just wanted to bring it up and thank Alec. And I also just want to take a minute to just talk about the channel and why I'm doing this and how much fun it's been. So for those who don't know, I have twin boys that are now 13 months old, and I started the YouTube channel a week before they were born, which in hindsight might not have been the best idea, right? But I was basically like, hey, my life is about to turn upside down, and this is something that I've always wanted to do. So I was able to gather up my buddy John and my brother Bobby, and we made that very first Criminal Syndicate tier list and deep dive, right? That's now approaching 4,000 views, which is amazing. Like I never thought that would happen, right? And you know, and then I saw last week I was just on the like Marvel Crisis Protocol subreddit, and I saw somebody recommended the channel to a new player, and they put a whole write up about. I think they were talking about the Criminal Syndicate tier list video and the list building video, and they just said, "Hey, go check out Syndicate Gaming. He does great breakdowns." And I don't know, it just really touched me, and I just want to thank everybody for their support and their kind words. Like the last video was my first like, live video where actual filming was done. I did video editing, and that's just gotten an awesome response. And then Alec and his friends, are able to buy me a couple coffees, and I just want to say thank you to everyone. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up. But thanks again to Alec specifically for essentially sponsoring this. All right, well, let's jump into why play Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, I made a little strengths and weaknesses list here, but one thing I left off of the strengths list is just that the Guardians of the Galaxy are just really cool, right? Like they have three awesome movies. They showed up in the Avengers movies. Like these are hilarious, fantastic characters, and you want to use them in game, right? And that's why it was kind of a shame that the Guardians were a little rough when they first came out. Um, and I think that was a big reason why AMG buffed them so much is because they were such big characters and popular, and they wanted them to play correctly in that way, right? People want to play Guardians and they want to feel good playing the Guardians. So, but to the actual gameplay, uh, I'd say one of their biggest strengths, if not the biggest strength, is their leadership. So it's on Star-Lord, obviously, and we're going to go into Star-Lord next. But the leadership is called Winging It. In every power phase, you hand out 3 Winging It tokens, and during that round, that character can spend a Winging It token to reroll 2 dice on an attack or defense roll. So this is just like this honestly might be the strongest leadership in the game because it's so flexible, right? It's like most leaderships are like you can reroll 1 attack die or you can reroll 1 defense die. And this is just like here's a token, spend it however you want, and you get 2 rerolls, right? And you get that across 3 people on your team. So it's not so the only really drawback is that if you go really wide, it doesn't affect your entire team, which we'll get into this, but the Guardians were designed at first to be a really wide team. They've kind of gone the opposite direction, and I think it's because of this leadership. But like that leadership is so good, and it's a reason to keep Star-Lord alive. All right, another strength is they have multiple 2 threats in affiliation. That's actually really rare. I was thinking about this. I believe it's only Guardians, A-Force, and Cabal. Hopefully, I'm not wrong about that. Um, but just having, well, first of all, most affiliations don't even have a 2 threat, let alone 2, because there's only, I think, 6 of them in the game. Maybe there's 8, actually. I don't know. But there's not very many. There's not enough to cover every single affiliation, right? And to have the options of 2 really good ones in Rocket and Nebula is very good because it allows you to go really wide. It lets you reach your like 3-person core at a really low threat, which is very strong. Um, I'd say the only downside is that Rocket and Nebula are kind of doing the same thing. They're just trying to kill people. So I think if like, Rocket was about killing and Nebula was about holding points, Guardians would be like ridiculously strong, but thankfully that's not the situation. One strength is they are very attrition focused. Like their primary game plan is to just go in there and take everyone out, right? Like not necessarily table the opponent, but get dazes and KOs at the right time to score victory points, right? And carry them to the win. Like, for those who have seen the, previous video about the, you know, Kingpin's criminal syndicate, they're kind of the opposite, right? It's like the criminals are trying to score as fast as possible and survive. Basically, the Guardians would be the opposite of that, where they're trying to kill enough people to, score in the late game and they have enough characters, right? It's like essentially you're trying to take them out early, so later in the game you're scoring all the points because they just don't have characters to score, right? The Guardians have really strong tactics cards, you know, cards that are specifically for the Guardians and cards that are on their characters. Like they have a pretty good suite here, which, we'll go into this deeper later. Um, they have a really wide range of threats. Like they have threats all the way from 2 to 6, which is pretty, I mean, I guess nowadays it's not that rare, but like that's pretty unique. Like, when you look at something like Spider Foes, they're literally all 3 and 4 threats, where Guardians have a huge range, right? Like like in Criminals, I keep bringing up Criminals because that's what I know, right? It's like they don't have a 6 threat. They only have 1, 2 threat. It's like Guardians can just pick and choose whatever they want. They actually have multiple options at most threat levels. I'd say the only threat that really lets them down here is the 3 threat, which we will get into. And I guess 5 threat, they only really have Angela. But it's worth keeping in mind that Nova and Yondu are coming out early next year, and they could shake up the Guardians, right? I'm just I'm gonna speculate right now that Yondu is a 3 threat and Nova is a 5 or 6. We'll see. And then finally, it's a great place to splash characters. So I'm sure most people know that Hulk and Thanos are taken a lot in the Guardians of the Galaxy, right? And it's primarily because of that leadership and because you can get such a cheap core of like 7 or 8 threat, right? And then you can fill out the rest of it with just powerhouses. So like if a very strong character comes out, you want to maximize that character, putting them into the Guardians of the Galaxy will do that, right? All right, let's talk about some of the weaknesses. So they have very little control. Um, their most controlling character is Beta Ray Bill, who's obviously a very good character, and we're going to be playing him a decent amount, right? But before Beta Ray Bill, it was pretty lean. Like Drax could like throw people sometimes, and it was like Groot throws off of his spender, right? But it was primarily just killing, right? Like you're killing the opponent, you're not pushing them or throwing them off of points. Most of the characters are pretty fragile. Um, this got buffed in those card changes I mentioned. I mean, it's been years now, but even so, most of the characters have like, threes in their defenses, maybe 5 or 6 health. Like even Groot, who's like a big tank, has a huge weakness with energy, right? And like Gamora is a 4 threat with only threes in defense, which you can use martial prowess, but that costs power and it's not like reliable. So that's something to keep in mind. Like most of the characters are kind of glass cannons, but the leadership does help with this, right? Because it gives them rerolls on defense. Although it is better to use those rerolls on offense. But another weakness is your opponents are gonna be ready for you. Like most opponents worth their salt have a plan against a team that's going to be trying to kill them, right? Like they're gonna have like, you know, brace for impact or sacrifice or just really tanky characters like ready to go in their squad, in their roster of 10 to bring in their squad, right? Like they're gonna have like heroes for hire. Like basically what I'm saying is there's counter plays to the Guardians of the Galaxy. And if you're bringing high threat splashes, those are some of the most like teched against pieces. Like if they see Hulk or Thanos in your roster, most people are going to have a pretty clean answer to that. And then finally, you just have like primarily one game plan, and that's killing. I will say the only like thing about this is if you bring a splash that's all about control, that can help mitigate this, right? So it's kind of like your core of Guardians is going to be killing them, but your splash characters are going to be doing a lot of control. And that can be tough to deal with. But for the most part, the Guardians are about taking out the opponent. All right, so there's our strengths and weaknesses. And next, we're going to be talking about Star-Lord because Star-Lord is our leader. I don't know why you would play Guardians of the Galaxy without Star-Lord on the field until Nova comes out, because AMG did say Nova will be a new leader and a high threat leader. So he's probably going to be pretty different from Star-Lord. But for now, we have Star-Lord. Um, just a quick breakdown on him. He has threes in his defenses, like we talked about, not great. 6 stamina. He has a range 4, 5 dice builder. That's it, nothing else. And then his spender's actually really good. Range 4, 7 dice, cost 3 power. And then each wild in the roll, you can give them bleed, shock, slow, or stun. That's a great spender. Like you should be doing that most of the time if you can. We've talked about the leadership. Oh wow, it actually works on dodges as well. I had forgotten about that. That's really good. Again, you want to be using it on offense to help push through damage, and also your dice on attack are more consistent, so you're going to be getting more out of the rerolls. he has hit and run. So this was one of the changes, like one of the updates to him, and it was massive because this actually allows him to be relevant if he gets like controlled out of the game, right? Like if he gets like thrown way out of range, he can move once and then hit and run to get an attack and move on to a point because Star-Lord is primarily going to be a point scorer, right? Like he's going to be on your home point, maybe holding an extract, shooting at range. Like you want him to be mobile to be getting you points. And with hit and run, he also contributes to the killing. Uh so he has this superpower plucky attitude. So to be honest with you, I don't play a ton of Guardians, but I've played against Guardians a ton, a whole lot, right? Because they're really popular. My friend John absolutely loves them. They're people use them in tournaments all the time. I have seen this plucky attitude where if you don't roll any hits on attack or any blocks on defense, just like completely flip a roll on its head, right? Like it is ridiculous. And as far as I know, he's the only character with this superpower, which is kind of cool, right? It's like his unique thing. I'd say mostly on defense is when this pops off, right? Because it's like, oh, I rolled two blanks and a hit. I just get automatic rerolls. Oh, look at that, I blocked two. Like that can be game changing. And then he obviously has flight. So just to go over my little list here, Star-Lord being a three threat is absolutely huge. If Star-Lord was a four threat, the Guardians are much worse. And it's because of this reason I was telling you where your core of Guardians, like your three Guardians you're going to bring a splash or two, is so cheap that your splashes could be so flexible, right? It's like, I think we've seen a trend in the game that most of the three threat leaders are very strong for that exact reason, right? It's like the less you have to put into your leader, because you basically have to have a leader if you want to be competitive, right? Like the less threat you put into them, the more threat you're putting into the very strong characters. So that is absolutely huge. He comes with such a good leadership, to boot. He's kind of like Miles. Like Miles is a three threat leader that's really good, great leadership. It's kind of the same situation. I have touched on this, but he fits really well into the game plan. It's like, yeah, he's scoring you some points to keep you in the game, but he's also contributing to the killing. Really, really good. Winging it works absolutely fantastic on tall teams. So, like at the Las Vegas Open, the finals was Star-Lord, Cosmic Ghost Rider, and Hulk, and that was a mirror match, right? So it's like when you use your winging it tokens, that is your whole team because you only have three models. Like there's no choice. Like your whole team gets the benefit, which is fantastic. But if you are going really wide, like you're kind of quote supposed to, you don't have to do anything, right? But if you're going like 5 or 6 wide, which you can with the Guardians, you can go super wide. You just place the winging it tokens either on your big hitters or on the characters that are in the most danger or have the most opportunity to deal the most damage, right? So it just works so well. Uh the spender, I've touched on it, but it's so good. Range 4, 7 dice, 3 power. Like if you're able to stack like stun and shock on a character, like they're pretty effectively shut down, right? And also, if you stun a character and then you come in with a big hitter like Cosmic Ghost Rider that will take them out, they only get 1 power. So they're kind of just shut down, right? Like that contributes so well to the killing plan. Um, yeah, plucky attitude, super good. And then he does have the option to bring the power gem. I think I've seen it once. And to be honest with you, it's not worth it, right? And it's because of him being a three threat. Like if you bump him to a four threat, it's like yes, the power gem is good because you have a guaranteed full auto or a guaranteed hit and run every single turn, but he doesn't need it. Like he just doesn't need it, and it's not worth the threat. Like that threat making Nebula into Groot is so much more impactful for your team. Like the focus is not Star-Lord, right? Like Star-Lord is there to support your team and do a little bit of contribution. You want the focus to be elsewhere. So giving him the power gem puts more focus on Star-Lord that you don't want. All right, so that's Star-Lord. Awesome character. Now, we're going to talk about the crises we want to bring because that's so important to our roster, right? So basically, it boils down to we want the slowest possible crises. And what I mean by that is the crises that score the least amount of points each round. So, this might be obvious to some people, but for those who are new or don't know, um, like obviously the crises have different amount of points you can score. Like if we look at a 5 point secure, like superpowered scoundrels, form sinister syndicate, that's 5 possible points. And if we pair that with like cubes, that's 10 possible points on the board, right? So if like disaster happens and the opponent gets 8 victory points round one, which I mean that's very difficult to do, but if it happens, like theoretically they could win on round two. And if our game plan is to wipe out the enemy, like daze and KO the enemy, 2 rounds is not enough time. So we want as much time as possible. So we want the crises that score the slowest and generally group people together for our like long range guns, right? So the ones I've picked out here, and I have discussed this with my buddies, for secures, gamma waves. This used to be a really high scoring secure. Now it's not. Most of the time, the most you're getting on this is 2 points because you'll have your home point in the middle. And so that's 2 points right there. And if things go really poorly, they can give 4 points. But even that is like not the end of the world, right? So gamma waves is good. It also deals damage if they're not standing on the points. So that's just helping your game plan, right? Of taking out the enemy. And then demons downtown. This one, the absolute maximum is 3. And if you stand on it, you get incinerated. So that's obviously really bad for the character that's standing on it because they roll one fewer defense die, right? We have a character in Beta Ray Bill that cannot be incinerated. So we can have Bill on a point scoring. He doesn't suffer the downside, but if the opponent is trying to outscore us, they're being lit on fire, allowing us to deal more damage, right? Like Demons Downtown is a great one. It's also straight down the middle. It just opens up for our guns, right? So now, I think the third secure is a little bit up in the air, and I've heard different things, right? So I think the one most people go for is intrusions, which that is 3 points across the middle, and you can spend a power to interact to go through a portal and show up somewhere else, right? So this crisis is really good for teams that are trying to deal damage because essentially, if you're scoring points, you're on one of these intrusions and you're always in range of somebody else, right? Because they can go through the portal, pop out, and get 2 attacks on you, and then even go back through. So I actually kind of love it with my criminal syndicate because they're so slow. My main problems, my main problem with this crisis in the Guardians of the Galaxy is that we don't necessarily want to be on the midline, right? Like we don't want to be standing in the middle of the board. We want to be a little bit further away, blasting, being a little bit cagey if we can. And that's primarily with like Rocket and Star-Lord and Agent Venom, because we can have Cosmic Ghost Rider just kind of flying wherever he wants, right? But like I think on that one you take a little bit too much damage back that we can't really handle because we have such low health and defense. So I think I would personally opt for Deadly Meteors, and that is a pay to flip. And some of our energy defenses are kind of rough, but it's not as killy as intrusions, right? Because it doesn't let you just like teleport around the board and get 2 attacks. Like it just benefits our charges and places and hit and runs. So that's the one I would go for. I wouldn't fault you for taking intrusions though. Um, yeah, so let's talk about extracts now. So again, we want the slower ones, the ones that don't score as many points. And I think the one right off the bat is research station. So for the most part, this only scores 2 points total, right? And to score it, you have to be dead smack in the middle of the board and you can't run away from it. Like most of the extracts, they can grab it and run. Like I just did a video on midline extract plays. You just can't do that on research station, which means we have the opportunity to attack the character on the research station, right? So I think that's a great one for us. I also really like Deadly Legacy Virus because it no longer has the thing where it gets to remove a status condition, and we like piling on status conditions. It's only 3 points. They're all in the middle. They probably don't have a lot of midline extract plays, right? So they're going to be up there. We're going to have chances round one to damage them. And it's kind of the same thing with Alien Ship, except that one can like randomly blow up and deal damage to you. And some of our characters end up with a lot of power. Like somebody like Rocket, the turn where he uses Deadly Duo, he can end up with a lot of power. And if he's holding an alien ship core, it can be kind of rough because like we already don't have good defenses, so taking auto damage is just like really bad, right? It's like we're even closer to death. Scrolls can be good. It can be absolutely devastating if the opponent grabs the scroll and gets pushed into you because it's just like free damage, right? But it's kind of like we don't have a lot of great ways to grab scrolls. It's like Bill can get the one in the middle, right? He has four defense, four physical defense on the roll, so he'll probably be okay. But otherwise, it kind of scares me a little bit for ourselves. Because, I keep saying we want to be killing the opponent, but we have to score points to stay in the game and take the lead later, right? Like, we can't just ignore the crises. I want to make that clear. Like, you have to still play the crisis game. It's okay if you're down a couple of points early, though. And then finally, hammers. So, hammers is obviously great for our guns, right? Like Rocket with a hammer is really scary. Because he can't even like be attacked. Like Groot can take it, so if Rocket has the hammer, it's tough to get it off of him. Um, my only thing with this is that it's 4 points on the board, which is obviously faster than the three from like Legacy Virus or Research Station or Alien Ship. And there's two on the midline, right? And Guardians currently, as of the Eyes on the Prize ban or rotation, whatever you want to call it, don't have a midline play. So if the other player has a safe hammer grab, and then you need to get the hammer, you're going to be just stuck there, right? Like you're going to have to double move to the middle, grab the hammer, and then you're open to the other player's shenanigans. So I don't know. That one kind of remains to be seen. Also, the Guardians play a lot of tactics cards, and the hammer making it cost an extra power can be a big deal. It's not like the end of the world, but it could matter. So I wouldn't follow you for taking any of these. I would probably go for Alien Ship myself, just for the slowness and like it could randomly deal damage to the opponent that we like. So you just have to be careful if you're holding it yourself. So that's the crises. I'd probably go Gamma Waves, Demons, Meteors, Research Station, Legacy Virus, Alien Ship. And we have Groot pressing the button. I figured he's at the like research station or something. He's right in the middle of the board about to explode. Or I guess he's literally on an alien ship. So there we go. All right. So what kinds of characters do we want? Like, what are we looking for when we select the characters for our Guardians of the Galaxy roster? So, I ported in the guidelines from the Criminal Syndicate list because I think it still applies, right? Like, generally, when I build a roster for my two threats, I want at least one, maximum two. Fortunately, Guardians have multiple options here, can take both. Three threats, I typically take two to three. Four threats, I take three to five because four threat is kind of like the new like average, like most characters that come out are 4 threats nowadays. 5 threats, I want minimum one, maybe two, and then 6 or more threats. Uh, Typically I say 0 to 1, but in Guardians of the Galaxy specifically, I think you definitely want at least one and potentially two because of this strong, like, low threat core, right? With two big splash characters. Like you could go Star-Lord, Rocket, Nebula, that's 7 threat, and then you could go Hulk for 13 and Malekith at 20, right? If you really wanted to do that. So I think Guardians stretch my guidelines a little bit here. And then I want at least 5 affiliated characters. Guardians, I'd say you want more than that. I think they just play well with it. But generally, if I'm building a roster, 5 affiliated characters, unless I'm doing a very specific splash or build, right? All right, so for the actual characters we want long range damage. Fortunately, we have a lot of that in the Guardians, right? We want some control. So I mentioned most of the Guardians don't have control. So if we bring splash characters, we probably want them to have a form of control because it's really only Bill in the Guardians that does good control. And even he can sometimes not get it off, right? Because he only gets 2 power a turn. He needs 3. Like if he's having a bad game, it could be rough. So characters with quote good dice. So our leadership hands out 2 rerolls, right? And if we have characters that count blanks or skulls or have built-in rerolls themselves, the rerolls count more, right? So, for example, Scarlet Witch, when she's attacking, she counts skulls in her rolls, right? Well, even on her defense, I think. So, if she's attacking, uses the winging it token, rolls 2 dice, she's even more likely for those rerolls to convert, right? And that's very powerful. Or like Corvus Glaive can count blanks on his attacks. He'd be a good splash. I actually think Guardians of Black Order combine together really well, which is kind of funny. But I said even more rerolls here. So, winging it's great, but it is a once per round ability, so we would like some rerolls somewhere, Like if we're trying to deal damage, we want as much consistency as possible, right? So somebody like Namor who has a reroll bubble would be really cool. We want mobility. So, you know, most rosters want a lot of mobility, right? But I think for Guardians, it's pretty important because, like, most of your turns, you just want to be doing 2 attacks, right? To get as much damage out as possible. So if we have somebody that can do 2 attacks and still move, that's really good, right? So that's kind of like Star-Lord can like attack, hit and run, move onto a point. Like that's very strong. You know, characters with like rapid fire that can't place themselves is like probably not what we're looking for because they're making a ton of attacks. They don't make the most out of winging it. Yeah. And then big boys. So I've mentioned this, a lot of people know this, but like having rerolls is better on stronger characters, right? So like Hulk with 2 rerolls is going to do more damage than I don't know, Clea with 2 rerolls. And we're capable of splashing these big characters because of our low threat core. All right. So let's talk about the characters themselves. Excuse me. So here on the right is the tier list that my brother Bobby and my friend John made on the channel. That's the only video that I have not appeared in, and this is what they came up with. Um, this kind of cracks me up, right? Because they put a lot of characters into S tier, and then A tier, and there's only one in B and C, right? And funnily enough, they made that video right before Cosmic Ghost Rider came out, and Guardians like took over the game. So when the video came out, they got a lot of comments about You can't put everyone in S tier, like that doesn't make sense, which, that makes sense. Like these should be a little bit more spread out, right? But like now in hindsight, it's like, oh wait, actually Guardians were very, very strong for a long time, and all these characters at S tier were like actively part of that, right? Star-Lord, Bill, Rocket, Groot, Cosmic Ghost Rider, Nebula, like they are S tier in a Guardians list because you're probably gonna bring them, right? I'd also throw in Agent Venom. Agent Venom has actually been surprisingly strong. Like he's seen a lot of play now, which we'll get into. But my personal take for our affiliated Guardians characters, I think you must take Star-Lord, obviously. Beta Ray Bill for that control. He's very strong. He loves demons downtown that we're bringing. Like he's just an all-star. Like yes, he took a hit from the Eyes on the Prize ban, but he's still worth it, especially in Guardians where he's affiliated. Rocket Raccoon. So my preferred two threat is Rocket. I know a lot of people like Nebula. Nebula is great. I have her in the great take category, but I think Rocket with Deadly Duo and the rerolls and the tactics cards that we'll talk about next is just so good in this affiliation. And my buddy John, who plays Guardians all the time, he loves the booby traps. He loves catching people with the booby traps because people always forget about it, right? They just move into range of Rocket and then Rocket blows them up to deal that last 1 or 2 points of damage. He's very good. I think for your two threats, I think it's like take Rocket, and then do you want Nebula for a second too? That's how I personally see it. So in great takes, Groot. So Rocket and Groot just naturally go hand in hand, right? Like I've played Rocket and Groot in other affiliations, and I actually think they should be played more outside of the Guardians. Like I used them in Asgard when Malekith was a big thing, and they were really good. You like just the fact that Groot tanks for Rocket, Rocket can't take collisions. Like Groot's downside is that he's not very mobile and he's really weak to energy, right? But I think it works in Guardians because like he can be the guy that double moves to the hammer and grabs it, right? It's like nobody else really wants to do that besides Beta Ray Bill, and he typically has like better things to be doing. It's like Groot is just kind of like your workhorse three threat that you need, right? And he just happens to also be amazing with Rocket and have a fantastic tactics card. I also said Agent Venom. I almost put Agent Venom into must take because I think he's very, very strong. And Marked for Death just got rotated out, and Agent Venom just always has that on his card, right? Like the main benefit of Agent Venom is that the opponent cannot modify their defense dice when he's attacking them, right? So they just roll their 3 or 4 defense dice and roll in their crits, and that's it, right? Whereas Agent Venom has like winging it tokens to back him up. It's like he just has such consistent dice, and they have bad dice, and he can like place himself and throw. Like he's just really good. His only problem is he's kind of squishy and weak to energy, but you can kind of play around that, right? Then I've touched on Nebula. Her big downside is she can't contest, like she can't score points, right? But she just does so much damage for a two threat. Like she punches up every time. Like the other player has to deal with her or they're losing characters for a two threat. Like they're probably trading down, and that's very, very strong. Um, Bringing Rocket and Groot, totally viable. All right, and then in the viable tier, like if you wanted to bring them, I would not fault you. Comes in Cosmic Ghost Rider, Angela, and Gamora. So let's start with Cosmic Ghost Rider. So when he came out, he was a menace, right? He was way too strong, to put it bluntly. He kind of warped the game. He has been toned down a lot, right? But I still think he's really good. Like, to be honest with you, I haven't even seen him played since he got nerfed. Like, essentially, they moved his power gain to the cleanup phase, so he doesn't get it at the start of round one. He can only use Chains of Sidorak to pull people and light them on fire once per round. His spender is a lot more power. Like he is definitely worse, right? But he's still strong, especially at Guardians where he gets the tactics cards and the leadership and yeah, like I think Cosmic's still good and people were just so tired of him they haven't played him since, right? But I can see you cutting Cosmic Ghost Rider for a different six threat like a Hulk, right? So Angela, previously I would have said that you might not want Angela in your Guardians list because like she's good, right? Like she's super fast, really mobile, does lots of damage, can throw size 4 terrain, but it's like she wasn't quite there. It's like there were just like better five threats you could splash in, right? Like that's the thing with Guardians. You have such good low threat characters that your high threat characters you just take from elsewhere in the game. But I will say, now that they've rotated out Eyes on the Prize, Angela is a safe midline grab, which I think contradicts something I said earlier, so sorry about that. But Angela, like, let's say you're playing on an odd number of extracts, like you're playing on Spider Infected and then like an even secure, like the Infinity formulas. Like, if you snag that middle extract and then you have two extracts plus the one you grabbed, and then they have two extracts and two secures, like, you're winning the game unless they come take it from you. And you want the opponent to be moving into you because then you're not spending the actions moving and attacking, right? Like you're spending actions doing coup attacks, which is fantastic for you. So if you're able to force the opponent to come into you, that's great. And Angela can do that, right? By stealing an extract. And then finally Gamora. So out of these characters, Gamora is probably the last one I'm taking, but she's good, right? Like she does so much damage. She has stealth. She has pounce to throw and deal damage. Her only thing is she's just very fragile, right? And she doesn't have any control. Like she's all damage. Whereas our other four threats with Agent Venom and Bill both have control. Like Bill, size 4 throw, Agent Venom, I believe it's size 3. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the same as classic Venom. I think Gamora just kind of got edged out, right? I will say this recent card update, they buffed Daughters of Thanos to only be one power each off of Gamora and Nebula. And I think that's huge because spending two power for a free attack is really, really good. Like that could be two power for a six dice builder with all this dice consistency. Like that is good. It might be reason enough to bring Gamora back in, right? Like maybe you play Bill, Agent Venom, and Gamora. I could totally see that. So worth trying out. Um, I just want to mention Drax and Ronan really quick. So I think the only reason to play Drax is that he's an affiliated three threat. So if we look here, the only other three threat is Groot, right? But like Groot has his weaknesses, and sometimes you need that affiliated three in Drax, right? Like if you don't want to bring Nebula because she's gonna mess up the scoring 'cause she can't score, like you're on a 5 point secure or something. Like having Drax can be nice. He's just kind of like boring, you know? He doesn't really do a whole lot. Like it's generally better to splash in three threats, I think, and we're gonna talk about that here soon. But I just don't think he quite gets there. The main reason to play him is that he is a three threat with the Guardians tag, and I think Yondu is going to be a three threat to fill in this specific role. So we'll see with that. And then Ronan is just so awkward. Like he doesn't have any action economy. He has some good attacks, a counter attack. He's he's very reactive when the Guardians want to be proactive, if that makes sense, right? It's like the Guardians want to be getting in there, dealing the damage, bullying the opponent, whereas Ronan is like, I will punish you for attacking me. and that's not really what the Guardians are trying to do. And he's a lot of threat, and you're just better off bringing a Splash or Angela. All right, so now to talk about unaffiliateds. In the must take, I said nobody. I don't think any unaffiliated character is mandatory in Guardians of the Galaxy. Like most of their roles are filled by characters in the Guardians, right? Like, the biggest hole is the control issue, but you do have Bill and Agent Venom, like Cosmic Ghost Rider has some control. So, and there's not a character that screams to me like play them in Guardians every single game, right? Whereas in, some other affiliations, it's like I'm playing Modoc in Convocation because he has ridiculous Mystic Defense and he can't be killed on the turn where they play Books of Shumagorath, right? Like, there's not that kind of synergy going on. It's like the leadership is just so good with literally any character in the game that you can just bring anyone. You just bring the characters that fit your playstyle or fill in the holes you've left in your roster, right? So, that comes down to the viable here. Anybody, like you could honestly bring any character in Guardians of the Galaxy and they will be better. Like that's just the kind of leadership it is, you know. And I think that's kind of thematic. It's like the Guardians will bring in anyone that wants to help, right? All right. So, oh gosh, what did I just do? That's awkward. Sorry about that. All right. So, for great takes, like the popular splashes, maybe some of the best ones, Thanos is pretty ridiculous in Guardians, specifically with the space and reality gems. So the space gem, he's moving himself to punch and deal damage. He could move like Groot back into range of Rocket so Rocket doesn't get killed, right? Like he can move Bill up so Bill doesn't need to move. And then he has the reality gems, so his dice are super consistent. And then you throw in the rerolls, and he's like ridiculously consistent. Like this is where Thanos can deal the most damage, right? Also, he adds dice to other people's attacks, which more dice with rerolls is just so good. Like, there's a reason why Thanos has been taken in Guardians for forever, right? And he's 8 threat, and you don't really care because of that low threat core I keep mentioning. So Thanos is fantastic. I actually don't think you need to build your entire roster around bringing Thanos every game. Like you can just have him in there and be like, I think this is a Thanos game. Like I need heavy control, heavy damage. Like it just works. Hulk. Hulk is obviously insane in Guardians. It's been proven time and time again. Like he has damage, he has control, he has mobility. He kind of does everything, right? Like I think if you're not gonna play Cosmic Ghost Rider, bringing Hulk is a great idea. Um, there's not much more to say about Hulk. He's just really good, and he's even better under the Guardians' leadership. So Sam Wilson, this is one that my brother pointed out to me. So Sam is really good in Guardians because like he's super mobile, has a charge, right? So he's kind of playing the workhorse role of like getting around while still making attacks. But what he does great is the Crisis Superpowered Scoundrels is 5 points on the board and it gives cover. That can be kind of disastrous for the Guardians because cover is just like a guaranteed defense die, right? Sam ignores that, and if he deals damage, he pushes them off of the point, right? So if they're no longer on the point, they no longer benefit from the cover, allowing your team to more freely damage them, right? So he's this nice blend of mostly control and mobility, right? That you kind of lack a little bit. Like you don't have too many long moves. You have like long moves with Gamora and Nebula, but Nebula can't score. So I think Sam is a great pick here, and you just use the winging it token on the push you need, right? Like the one you really need to get through is when you use the winging it token. Um, and now we have Spectacular Spider-Man. So this is the 3 threat Spider-Man. out of the core set 2.0, Earth's Mightiest. Uh, I like this one a lot too because he's just really flexible, right? It's like he has a range 3 attack, he can place himself. Like we love the mobility again. Like he can throw people for fairly cheap. Like Spider-Man is great at like, starting his turn with 2 power, dealing an attack that's a gainer, which is fantastic. So you have the guaranteed throw to then throw somebody off a point or into somebody else. Like he's just a really flexible and good 3 threat. And I think the 3 threats are our weakness, right? With just Groot and Drax. So I think bringing in these splash threes can be really good. I have also thought about Weapon X. He just got spoiled at Mini Extravaganza. That dude just does so much damage. Like he's basically a 3 threat Nebula. So it might be kind of hilarious having Nebula and Weapon X, and you're like, hey, to counter these characters, you just kill them, but you probably can't kill both of them, and they're gonna punish you back really hard. So I think Weapon X would be kind of cool too, because he can get up to like a 9 dice builder, throw in the rerolls, like he's taking people out. Um, and then viable, I mean anybody. Like if you have a pet character, throw them in. If you love Ant-Man, Ant-Man can deal a lot of damage round one. Like with 2 rerolls, it's even more damage. Like, yeah, it's really cool. All right, so that's the characters. So for me personally, I'm going to give you my 10 chosen characters. Um, so I'm just going to read them off here and I'll talk about them. So Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, Groot, uh, Beta Ray Bill, Flash Thompson, Venom, uh, Cosmic Ghost Rider, Angela, Thanos with the Space and Reality Gem, Sam Wilson, and Spectacular Spider-Man. So I've opted to only go 1 2 threat, so I left out Nebula, but I could totally see swapping Sam or Spider-Man for Nebula just to have the option, right? Like you might not need both Sam and Spider-Man. Um, then a couple other easy swap-ins, right? Like Gamora. Like you could bring in Gamora and Nebula and play Daughters of Thanos. Like that can be really good. You can make room for it if you want to. You could swap Cosmic Ghost Rider for Hulk. Like having the option of Hulk or Thanos is very powerful because like the kind of stuff that counters Hulk doesn't necessarily counter Thanos, and the other player can have trouble deciding on what like counters to bring, right? So that can be really good if you want to do that. And then Drax if you just want to get more Guardians in there instead of, these splash threes. So that's what I'm going with. Pretty happy with it. Um, yeah. All right, let's talk tactics cards. So the Guardians of the Galaxy cards I like. The must take is Galaxy's Greatest. So it's not on the screen here, but it's a newer one that came with Cosmic Ghost Rider. It says when you play the card, any amount of injured Guardians of the Galaxy can spend 2 power each to play the card, and they get a token. And while they have that token, they add 1 die to their offensive and defensive rolls. So I think that card is just amazing, right? It's like characters are going to be injured, right? They're gonna have power to play it because they were injured. They took power when they were damaged. Um, and then just adding a die to all of your attacks and also defense, like going from 3 defense to 4 defense is a big deal, right? Like that's a 33% increase, and you get rerolls on top of it. Like more dice with rerolls is just insane. So, like, the card says up to 4 people can play it, but I think optimally 2 people playing it is good, right? Like that's 2 extra dice every activation, essentially, right? So I think that card is fantastic. Um, I will mention that they rotated out Crew of the Milano, and I would have said that that previously was a must take. That card was pretty strong. Like I think that made Cosmic Ghost Rider pretty ridiculous because you couldn't stagger him, you couldn't stun him. Like I remember when I played Kingpin into Cosmic Ghost Rider, I would stun and stagger him. They're just like, oh, I'm gonna wipe it with Crew of the Milano. It's like, oh, great. So I'm glad that card is gone. I'm betting it would have been insane with Nova. We'll see, but keep in mind that is out of here. So strongly consider lovable misfits. Oh, I have that on here twice under strongly consider and fine. Um, Basically that's the card where any amount of guardians can pay a power and you roll a die and something random happens, right? Like you either get your power back or you make a free attack or you get a move or you stun yourself and everyone around you. So it's obviously very RNG dependent, you know, like it's random, but it can do amazing things. Um, I know a lot of players don't like the randomness of it, but you're favored to get the good effect, right? It's like I think you only do it if you're okay with the stun, stunning yourself and the team. Like it was really good with Crew of the Milano because if you did stun yourself, you could just wipe it, right? So maybe it's actually worse now that that card is gone. So that's kind of like a personal preference thing if you like the randomness or not. And for an assignment, so I think this card is like ridiculous with Agent Venom. Uh, so during his turn, Venom can spend any amount of power. Essentially, every 2 power he spends, he gets an effect, and he has to be within range two of one of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So the ones that really matter here are Star-Lord and Rocket. So for Star-Lord, if he's within range two of Star-Lord, he immediately makes his spender that I talked about is so strong without spending the power. So that's just 2 power for a range four, 7 dice energy attack that does conditions. And he then moves short. You move Venom short. That's ridiculous. Like, just using this for that is perfectly fine. You know? Like, 2 power for a spender attack and a short move. Okay. But also, if he had spent 2 more power, or if you weren't in range of Star Lord, he could do the same thing with Rocket Raccoon. So basically, if he's within two of Rocket Raccoon, he's already made an attack. He can make another attack, and then he advances short. So essentially, what this is saying is, Venom gets to make 3 or 4 attacks during his activation, and that's just like really, really strong. Like when your game plan is to deal damage, getting extra attacks is really, really good. So, like within Groot, he heals himself. Gamora can throw him. Drax can throw him, but those don't matter as much, I think. And keep in mind that you can like start within two of Star Lord, make the attack, advance short to be within range of Rocket to then get his attack. So yeah, the card's really flexible and really strong. I think if you're playing Agent Venom, you should be bringing Foreign Assignment. That seems kind of obvious. So I think Fine was supposed to be Daughters of Thanos here. I think I just did a typo. Sorry about that. But I mentioned this earlier, but Daughters of Thanos seems good now. Like you obviously need Gamora and Nebula, but 2 power for a free attack, like that's kind of like what I was talking about with Agent Venom, right? Um, the only big restriction is that they have to attack the same character, so they need to be close to each other, right? Like, and that could be a problem, but like they're both very mobile with long moves. Like Gamora has a pounce, Nebula places off of her spender, right? So like you can set it up if you want to. Um, I would play this if I had those two characters in my roster. And then cards that aren't technically Guardians of the Galaxy but are really strong. Uh, Deadly Duo. This is the Rocket and Groot team up. It lets Rocket make 3 attacks. Like him and Groot both spend 2 power, and he just does a ton of attacks. Like this is how Rocket gets so much power to play like patch up. or it used to be follow me, and that was like kind of ridiculous. That got banned a long time ago. But if you're playing Rocket and Groot, bring Deadly Duo. And you need to keep in mind that competent opponents will counter it, right? Like they will play around it. Like whenever I see the other player has Deadly Duo, I'm keeping them apart or I'm dazing one of them, right? It's like, you know, the car is really strong, but it has some hoops to jump through. Like there's a range requirement. They both have to be awake. They both need power. So if you have the opportunity to play Deadly Duo and get two attacks, just do it. Like, it doesn't matter. Just fire it off because otherwise you might not get the chance. Then We Are Groot is Groot's like big AoE heal. I don't think it's like absolutely essential, but it is really good. Like I would bring it against other attrition focused teams, right? Because it's like you just kind of heal a ton on your whole team. Like it's really good on those clumped up scenarios like gamma waves or demons that we're playing anyways. So, um, yeah, and a lot of the like generic tactics cards have rotated out, so I think We Are Groot is even more viable now. And it's another reason to bring Groot if you were on the fence. So for the generic cards, I would bring Brace for Impact because you are low health, low defense on some of these characters. So like Brace is just guaranteed surviving. Patch Up, like Star-Lord and Rocket specifically, if they like spike a couple times, they just have tons of power to patch up your big splash character, Cosmic Ghost Rider, whoever, or even Groot. Like Rocket patching up Groot can be really strong. That's what I would bring. Um, Recalibration Matrix. So this is just like another layer of dice consistency. It's like if my rerolls failed and I still messed up or I'm gonna die, I just fire that off. Like it's specifically really good with the big characters. So if your plan is to bring a Hulk or Thanos or Cosmic Ghost Rider, bring Recalibration Matrix. Fallback, survive the card rotation. It's just really strong, and it's so good at keeping your characters alive. Like it can make it tough for them to be double tapped, and we don't want that because they're so fragile, right? So fallback is great. Oh, then I said Bird of Prey is what I'm bringing because I have Sam Wilson. There's a lot of characters with flight. It helps him deal even more damage, because that's kind of his one weakness. He doesn't deal a lot of damage, but Bird of Prey really lets him take out another flying character. All right, so here's the final roster. I'm gonna read it out for you. So characters: Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, Groot, Agent Venom, Beta Ray Bill, Cosmic Ghost Rider, Angela, Thanos with Space and Reality, Sam Wilson, Spectacular Spider-Man. Tactics cards, Galaxy's Greatest, Foreign Assignment, Lovable Misfits, Recalibration Matrix, Patch Up, Brace for Impact, Fallback, Bird of Prey, Deadly Duo, We Are Groot, and then Secures, Gamma Waves, Demons Downtown, and Intrusions, Extracts, Legacy Virus, Research Station, Alien Ship. So there it is. That's what I would play right now if I was going to play Guardians. I prefer Thanos over Hulk. Swapping Thanos for Hulk makes a ton of sense. I would probably cut Spider-Man for Nebula if I was going to do that, right? And then you could do like, you could swap Agent Venom for Gamora if you really wanted to. But I think Agent Venom is kind of essential right now, especially against Web Warriors. It's kind of funny, he is a Web Warrior, but he's really strong into Web Warriors. Um, just to recap, I can see bringing Deadly Meteors. The only problem with that is like you're pretty low on energy defense with like Agent Venom and Groot and Rocket. Kind of struggle with the energy defense. Even Thanos only has three, so that one needs some testing. It really comes down to your personal playstyle. So yeah, we just went over the tactics cards. So that's gonna be the roster. Again, huge shout out to Alec and the buddies at his LGS. He didn't say where they were, but wherever they are, huge shout out. And if you want to help me, you know, directly and or if you have a specific video you want to see, check out the Buy Me a Coffee down in the description below to support me directly. So that's gonna be it for me, guys. That's my Guardians of the Galaxy list build. Hopefully you learned something. Let me know what you think. If you want to see more list builds in the future, what list builds you want to see, and what other things I can do on the channel to improve. So thanks for watching, everybody. I really enjoy doing this. I want to keep doing it. So yeah, I'm not sure what'll be next. I want to talk about the New Mutants. I think they look really cool. I want to spend some time on them. I want to do a like update on the current state of Criminal Syndicate because we just found out that Loki is in Criminal Syndicate, which kind of blows my mind. I was not thinking that would be a thing, but yeah, there'll be something next week. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.